Thank you, Ron. And yes, for those of you who might have joined late, my name is Ricardo Suarez. I'm an advocate at AWS. I have spent the last 35 years working in tech. Up until recently, I was focusing on open source, but now I've kind of switched, and now my life is completely devoted to all things Amazon Q Developer, which, if you're not aware of, is a next generation developer tool that I strongly believe is going to help make developers more productive. So I want to set some context first because developer productivity is something that's top of mind for many organizations. I'm just sharing just one recent article from the FT, but you can look at the various IT presses and you'll see that for many businesses, finding developers and skills shortages has been a constant theme, and top of mind really is how they can improve the productivity of the existing developers they have. But as developers, one of the questions that I've been asking a lot as I've been talking to them is actually how much time do you spend actually doing and writing code? And the answer actually may shock you. When I poll developers, most of the time they're telling me 20 to 30%. And this is backed up by independent studies that show that a lot of the time developers aren't actually writing code, but they're doing a lot of the other activities that are involved. And I'm going to come to those sort of later on. Now, kind of part of the, I guess, kind of the other side of this is developers are always operating in a constant state of change, which makes trying to predict what we're going to see coming forward actually that much more difficult. But what we can do is we can try and look to the past and see if we can detect some trends and patterns. And so when we look at developers and how they've developed, what they've been developing with, we can see that we've gone from the olden days of punch cards to using assembler and machine code to compiled languages and scripted languages. And as we've innovated and improved along the axis, we've been able to improve the developer experience, improve their productivity, enable more developers to enter the field. And this has also been a kind of like a thing that we've seen with the tooling they use. And developers are kind of like always keen to use the latest tools. And so back in the early days, people were using Vim and Emacs to write code. Then we started seeing the first IDEs, integrated developer environments. Then we started to see innovations like auto-completion and IntelliSense. Then frameworks came along to make things easier, and then domain-specific languages, and more recently, low code. So I guess the question is if developers aren't actually writing code, what else are they doing? And it actually turns out that they're doing all these things. And there's probably a few things that I've not put on there, which they're also doing. And I've been speaking with developers on this topic for about 6 months now, and every time I hear something new, I add this to this list. So it turns out that across the software development lifecycle, it's not just about writing code; it's about all these different things, from attending meetings with stakeholders to better understand what their code needs to achieve, to making sure that the actual code is shipped and operating and functioning as expected. Now, developers also use other kinds of resources in order to do the work and to help them be more effective. I mean, I can still remember a day before the internet, before search engines, and our productivity and ability to create code was, severely, hampered. Then we saw when we had, the various search engines, and from search engines, we then got these silos of knowledge, such as Stack Overflow and other websites, allow developers to quickly find answers to the problems that they were looking to solve. And when you think about it, the programming languages that we work in, I often joke again when I speak with these developers, how many languages do you speak? I'm Spanish, so I speak English and Spanish, but I also speak Python and Java, right? There's a lot of similar characteristics in programming language, and so I think that what I see is the kind of natural evolution of some of the supporting sort of tools that developers are going to use comes from generative AI, and how generative AI can actually take that next leap in kind of productivity. And so I kind of like think of this new era of tools like Amazon Q Developer, are kind of a generational in the impact they're going to have, and we are beginning to only explore how the craft of the developer is going to be reimagined and evolved. And I stress to add that this is very much at the beginning of our journey, and this is going to allow developers to be more productive. It's going to help them focus on the more productive, more important aspects of the role as a developer, and I think it's actually going to make them a lot happier. When I look at actually how I'm using these tools myself to improve my own effectiveness across all these activities, I'm using Amazon Q Developer to do all these activities. So from them being a chore to do, I can now actually take that work, give it to Amazon Q, and it can do it for me. So I'm going to give you through some examples of this. Now, I keep mentioning Amazon Q Developer. Now, this is our generative AI coding assistant that provides guidance across all the different stages of the software development lifecycle. What's interesting about it is it's got a number of different modalities, and those modalities map to what software developers use and do. So whether you're in the AWS console, whether you're in the IDE, or whether you're in the command line, you can use Q across all of those modalities. And I'm just going to share. This is a screenshot I did earlier today just to show this. So when I'm coding, so this is a Python application that I was doing within the actual code itself. I can use Q to give me inline suggestions, okay, by being prompted. So that's the green prompt there. I might want to do something a bit more complex, so I can actually use the chat interface and be more involved and give it a large prompt, and it will then give me some information. Or I can actually go into the actual CLI and again ask Q to tell me or remind me how I can use a specific command line. And where I'm really using this a lot actually is in things like Kubernetes commands or Git commands, which I don't always remember the kind of the command lines. And if I'm in the AWS console, I can also use this. This was actually again today. I was running asking Q to help me refactor a query that I've got in Athena, and I can use Q console to do this. So Q, allows you to work across all the different modalities, but it's more than that. Okay. And I think this is what some of the really cool features that I'm beginning to use and explore. One of them is that allows you to go beyond code suggestions that are actually in the training data, and it actually allows you to use your own source code and libraries in the suggestions it provides. So my colleague Ricardo has done a really good post and video. So if you prefer video, then you watch this. I think it's 15 minutes. This is available to the pro tier of Q Developer, and it provides, after following a simple set of instructions, that you take your libraries and your source code either in S3 or in GitHub or GitLab. It will then create a fine-tuning job, and then it will appear in Q as an option, effectively a fine-tuning model that you can use for coding suggestions, and that's really, really cool. Q can also help you reduce your tech debt. One of the ways that, so this is using a feature called Amazon Q Agent for software transformation. And one of the things that we are using it for internally at Amazon is actually to help move from older versions of Java to newer versions. So upgrading from Java 8 to Java 17. This is such a big blocker, for many organizations where, they want to upgrade all their older applications, but they just don't know how to, or don't have the bandwidth. And tools like Amazon Q Developer Agent for code transformation can really, really help accelerate that. Q can also not just suggest code, it can actually automate the process of creating code as well. So this is a thing called agent for software development, where you do /dev and then you give it a prompt. It will generate a plan. It will allow you to then review that plan and then say, do you want to create the code? It will then create the code for you, whether that's asking you to create an application or maybe asking to write tests or even just writing documentation. And this is benchmarked actually in something called SWE Bench. I'm not sure if people are familiar with this, but this is like a benchmark that's emerged to compare all the many hundreds of new AI coding assistants that are evolving. And what they do is basically they take a bunch of Git issues and they test these agents around how good they are at fixing them. So at the moment, Amazon Q is doing pretty well in this, but check out the benchmark because it's always changing. And it's a fast-moving pace. So I already mentioned this, but I get probably my favorite use at the moment of the Amazon Q and the command line is to allow me to auto-generate my Git commit messages because one of the things I always do, and I should do better, is my Git commit messages are terrible. And when I look at other repositories, my favorite repositories, I don't see maybe always the detail level I need. But now we are finally getting to a situation with the flexibility of tools like Amazon Q developer on the CLI that will allow us to automate what we want to put in our commit messages without actually having to do all the work, right? And this is a really, really super useful thing. One of my colleagues has written a blog post about this, and it's walks you through the process of doing it. And for me, this has been absolute a game changer for me. Now, aside from Amazon Q Developer, we also have Amazon Q Apps, which is a new feature which unlocks the power really to extend, or what we call create a new generation of developers. So extending the low code model. And where this I think is useful from a development perspective is if you imagine you've got an organization and you're bringing on new developers, it's how you can use these tools to onboard developers faster. So most organizations that I've worked for in the past have got repositories, standards, engineering blueprints, policies, templates. And when you, as part of the onboarding process, you will typically familiarize yourself where these are and what they are. But now, for the first time, using tools like Amazon Q Apps, we've got the ability to integrate into those repositories, integrate into Confluence or Jira, and then basically ask using a chat interface, I need to create a new application. What are the organization standards for MVC type application? And it will give me the information. So I think we're going to see a lot of organizations start to use these tools to help onboard their developers faster. So, what kind of makes Amazon Q, developer different? I've been using coding assistants for over 12 months. I've used many of them. So I want to share my thoughts are really around some of the key, three key areas I think where Amazon Q excels. And the first one is, we've taken over 17 years of AWS knowledge, building and running AWS services, and that information has been used to train a model. And so, no one else has that kind of knowledge. And so when you're using Amazon Q, you're getting the benefit from the models that we use of that insight and that experience. Security has always been at Amazon the most important priority, and this is no different in the field of generative AI. So we apply the same approach that customers have trusted us and depend upon to secure our generative AI services, including the ones that power Amazon Q Developer. So Amazon Q can understand and respect existing governance identities, roles, permissions. This is very true when you're setting up Amazon Q Developer. It gives you lots of flexibility as to who can and who can't have access to it. And it's familiar to people who are already using Amazon Q. Another aspect is that from a privacy perspective, your data remains yours, okay, and we don't train the model when you're using the pro tier. We don't use your data for any training purposes. It's yours and will remain private for always. And then kind of a third area really is how we have really embraced and are using kind of responsible AI. When you look at and use Amazon Q, you'll notice there's a link at the bottom of the prompt box that says basically, or rather, it's a link to the AWS Responsible AI policy. And this policy covers these kind of areas around safety, controllability, explainability, etc. Okay, and I've actually put a link to it there. And so when we built our services, we built them with this front and center. We take a people-centric approach that looks at this and has the guardrails built in. And now this does have some, consequences. Sometimes you will encounter these guardrails if you try and ask it to do naughty things, right? It's not going to do that for you. So the future is here now. Okay, I look at Amazon Q Developer as representing really, a new kind of like capability in the developer toolbox, which was going to really kind of, I think, supercharge their productivity. One of my colleagues, Massimo, he's put this kind of really cool kind of like blog post, which I've got a link in the bottom right there. But I think the way he's thinking about it and the way I think about it as well is that if you have the expectation that these things are going to do everything for you, that's not quite where we are today, right? But what they are really useful for doing, okay, is they're really useful, I think, in two areas. First of all, boosting your productivity and knowledge in areas you already have kind of some experience in. And also, they lower the barrier to learning new things within adjacent areas. And so this is the boost zone and the learning zone. So I encourage people to read this post because it goes into a lot of detail as to this kind of mental model. But where I kind of see this really today and how I'm using it is that I see that a lot of the stuff I'm going to do, I'm going to probably hand over to generative AI because it can do it quicker, better, and it'll take the kind of the toil out of it for me. But that will leave me with all the kind of more interesting and cool things I think that I do, and actually what makes being a developer much more interesting and fun. So I think we're going to see this natural evolution of undifferentiated heavy lifting being done by tools like Amazon Q Developer that allow us to really focus on the important things that business want us to focus on. And so my kind of semi prediction around where this is going is kind of three areas. I think developers are absolutely going to remain core and at the center of development, but generative AI is going to provide them with these new superpowers, right? That's going to allow them to take on and deliver much more complex and larger projects, things that typically would have been delivered by teams of people. I think now developers are going to be able to do those by themselves. So that's going to be really, really cool. The fact that developers are front and center and they've kind of got these new superpowers, but they're still doing it. And I think the other thing is that this is going to lead to really where a focus on when you're building solutions or when developers are building solutions, they're going to focus their energies really where they can bring the most value. Okay, which makes sense. We've been doing this, through the last 35 years. I've been working. And I said I work in open source. Open source is all about really building on the shoulder of giants. Okay, you focus on your value add and use open source frameworks and building blocks because they do it much better than you can. So I think ultimately, tools like coding assistants like Amazon Q Developer really are making the future of development incredibly optimistic and bright. So if you want to get started today, okay, the good news is you do not need an AWS account, okay? So if you have one, then great, but you don't need one. There are kind of two tiers of Amazon Q Developer. There's this free tier, and you sign up with what's called a Builder ID. And it's just an email address, and that will actually get you into Amazon Q. No problem at all. The professionals, or sorry, the pro tier, okay, provides some additional capabilities. The customizations that I mentioned, for example, the transformation, those are available on the pro tier at the moment. So two kind of like actions, I guess. We have a very active community that covers content. So if you want to learn more about Amazon Q Developer, find out what people are doing with it, because like I said, it's so new. It always amazes me that every day I'm reading new exciting ways that people are using these coding assistant tools. So go to the community.aws link and find out some of the really cool things that people are doing. If you want something a bit more interactive, then there's a link here. This will take you to the Developer Center, where it will actually provide much more kind of like developer focused resources that will allow you to kind of like start getting hands-on and start trying new things. So that's me kind of wrapped up. If you want a copy of the deck, you can click on that link, the QR code. There's a little survey, I think 6 or 7 questions. If you would be so kind to answer those, you'll then get a copy of PDF of this presentation. And I think I've got 2 minutes, Ron. So I think if there's any questions, I'm happy to take questions.